Hello and welcome to my Devil Hunter skill build showcase. In this video I'm gonna show you my 3v3 build, my 1v1 build and also my PvE build. Starting off with the 3v3 build, we have 4 levels into Spiral Tracker and I take the second tripod for the 15% critical hit chance for 6 seconds. The reason I take this is because this buff applies to your allies as well, so anyone that attacks that target hit by this skill, which can help you deal a lot more damage as well as your teammates. As the second skill, Grenade, I take 7 levels into this, and the first tripod I take is the extra range. It's because I feel like the standard range of this skill is too short for me to feel comfortable actually using this skill. At that distance it's really easy to just dash into you and counter that skill very easily. Also when you have the extra distance you can catch people when they don't think they're in range of your skill. And the second tripod I take the third option, which is the freeze. Uh, the reason I take the freeze is because I want to counter classes like Berserkers and Destroyers who are very protected against super armors and microstuns. So it helps them to get them out of certain animations, certain abilities. It's also a good way if you're out of movement skills, so super armors, to just keep your target stationary for a bit to let your cooldowns come up again. Then we have execution. Here I take the extra distance traveled, and that's because you don't only use this skill for the knockdown and for the catch that you can get with this skill. You actually use it just as a movement skill sometimes as well. Therefore I have the super armor on it, so you can actually use this both to engage on targets like a warlord, so when they're charging at you, you can use the skill into them, so their knockdown don't count because you're super armor, but you get the knockdown on them. It's also good to escape with as well. Then we have the first max out skill, and this is one of the most important skills that we have, and it's Summer Soul Shot. In the first tripod I take the reduced mana. Not that we have mana issues anyway, but it's just all three of them are pretty bad, so I just take the mana reduction. The second tripod I choose the 20% extra attack speed, which just basically makes the skill faster. It's a movement skill, I want it to be as quickly as possible so you can get out of danger with this skill. And the third tripod is the super armor. In this skill you're immune to microstuns and knockdowns, however you're not immune to stuns and such. After this we have equilibrium, and same here as Spiral Tracker, I have the 15% critical hit chance buff, although with this skill it lasts for 12 seconds. Same thing here again, it applies to your allies as well, so getting this buff on as many enemies as possible can really help your team in some clutch situations. Then we have the second maxed out skill, which is Despair. Um, Here we take the super armor in the first tripod. This is basically because the skill has a very long animation. It's very easy to dodge or out super armor someone in this skill. You usually last longer in this skill than most other classes do in their super armors. In the second tripod I use the double knockdown or double grenade. You can use the freeze as well. I prefer to use a double knockdown because usually people dodge the first one, and some people that are not as cautious can get hit by the second one. They're not expecting that one. The reason why I don't run the freeze is because that first of all you need to complete the entire animation and in the perfect zone for it to actually apply. And when you're using Despair, you have the super armor on until the exact second you release. As soon as you release in the perfect shot, you're completely vulnerable to CCs. So it's not a viable option to rely on the freeze. The other reason is also that freezes are very hard to do combos out of. So when you are doing a combo with a freeze, you do the freeze, you can't knock them up, and you can't microstun them afterwards. They're just stuck in their freeze. You can, however, learn the timing, where you freeze an enemy and then afterwards hit them with a knockdown as soon as they come out of their freeze. And the third tripod, I have the dash. The reason I take this on the spare is because you don't only use this skill as an engagement tool, you can also use it as just a movement skill in general. So either you use it as to catch people, that you dash in and get them with a microstun. That's one of the easiest way to actually catch people. But you can also use it, use it just as a movement skill. So instead of holding the skill, you just tap it and it's like an extra dash. So instead of just having somersault and your space, you can actually use Despair Execution for a quick burst of distance. After Despair, we have Quick Shot, and this is one of the most important skills Devil Hunters have. It is required to take the second tripod here. It basically makes the CC of Quickshot last longer, which makes it available for us to actually do a combo through this skill. So the main possible combo we can do with this is Despair or any other skill that applies a microstun. We can right after it use Quickshot to make the CC last. And since this CC now lasts for that long, thanks to this tripod, we can easily go from a microstun into Quickshot and then into something like Last Supper. It's one of our main tools to actually catch out an enemy, and it's the easiest way for us to start a combo. That's why this is basically required to have. Otherwise it's going to be really hard for you to actually get the CC or get the damaging skill onto your opponent. Moving on, we have the third skill that we max out, and this is Last Supper. This is one of your main damaging skills as Devil Hunter. I always max this out no matter what. And the first tripod is basically less cooldown, which is, you can never go wrong with that. You always want to have as much uptime on your skills as possible, especially a skill that damages as much as this do. In the second tripod, I take the extra dash and damage on exhausted enemies. This is basically, I use the Last Supper either first after quick shot combo, or I use it last in a full double knockdown combo. I also like to have the extra distance traveled with it, because you can go from sniper skills into Last Supper without having to move in between. So you basically have the movement in the skill rather than taking the time to move yourself, which can be crucial in some situations where your opponent doesn't have a recover, or you basically just don't have time to move close enough to hit the skill. And the third tripod, I basically just takes the extra hits. Uh, this is just so you have more chances to get crits, and you also have more general damage than the double barrel do. The double barrel I would only recommend if you like to use Last Supper outside of combos. So if you decide to have it instead of having a CC on your opponent, as I said before, it's a lot easier to hit this skill when they're not CC'd if you have this double one. But I still prefer to use the triple shot more. After this we have Spiral Flame. Spiral Flame I take 4 points into, and I take the reduced aim time. 50% reduced aim time is big. It's a lot actually when you think about it. And without this, it's gonna take a long time for the skill to actually go off. It makes your opponent have a lot more time to react towards the skill, which we don't want. We want it to be as fast as possible. That's why I take this one. You can also take Spiral Flame up to level 7 if you prefer some more consistent damage, but I usually keep it at 4 for the extra reduced downtime. Then we have aim shot. I take this to level 7, starting off with the reduced aim time here as well. This is the same time as with Spiral Flame. You want the opponent to have as low time to react as possible. You don't want them to be able to react to your laser. And in the second tripod, I take the stun. Having the stun, especially in 3v3s, I feel is one of the most important skills, because you can catch out multiple people with this stun. And since there's no way you can counter stun without using your space, it's a really powerful tool to use. Some people choose the extra bullet size. I feel that the skill it's not hard enough to hit the skill that you would need the extra range of it, or the extra area of hit. So I prefer to use a stun to either get some free damage with Spiral Cannon, or also help out an enemy, or help out a teammate, by stunning an enemy in the middle of their super armor damage combo. And for the last skill we have Perfect Shot. Probably one of my favorite skills for Devil Hunters. We're starting off by taking the super armor on the skill. This is just to make it safer to use in general. You can take the penetration as well, but having the safety of not being able to get micro-stunned in the skill is a very big comfort, because you can pull it out on different occasions than you could before without this one. In the second tripod I take the extra damage on the skill, and this is because in the third one I take the perfect aim, and this is because with perfect aim you can cancel out the skill, and also when you go the entire distance it will automatically perfect zone the skill. That's why I take the extra damage. So every time I do the skill I will have that extra damage. And as I said, the biggest reason I take this one is because you can cancel out the skill. Um, so when you cancel out the skill, you can basically do this and right click and you'll cancel out of the skill. It doesn't go on cooldown and you can bait out movement from enemies. It's also an easy way that, since you don't have the perfect zone as it usually have, you don't have to focus on your bar down here. You can focus entirely on what your enemy is doing. You don't have to watch the bar at all. That's why I prefer to use this in 3v3s, where it's crucial for you to keep track of where your enemies are. Moving on to the 1v1 build, uh, we have a lot of the same things as the 3v3 one. I will still go through them, but I won't explain why I choose those tripods again. If you want explanation towards the 1v1 build skill, check the 3v3 build part of the video. First of all, we have the nade at level 7 for the extra distance and for the freeze. After this we have execution. Here we still pick the extra distance covered in the first tripod and the super armor in the second tripod. In third we still max out Summoner Soul Shot because, and I can't stress this enough, this is one of the most important skills in the Devil Hunters kit. This is like having an extra space, but they still have pressure to CC someone if you use it at the correct times as well. The utility it brings is just unmatched by any other skill in our kit, so you need to max this out. I take the mana reduction on the first tripod, I take the extra attack speed or reduced attack animation at the second tripod, and in the third tripod I use the super armor on this skill. Moving on to the first change compared to the 3v3 build. Instead of using the crit chance on Equilibrium, I take the attack speed instead. The reason I do this is because I use Equilibrium as a last damage dealing skill. I rarely use it if any of my other damage skills are off cooldown. Hence I don't get the extra critical hit chance as often as I would if I prioritize the skill. So I'd rather have that extra attack speed and won't be stuck in animation as long as I would have been with any other tripod on this skill. Moving on to Despair, we have the same thing as in the 3v3 build. You can, however, both in 3v3 and in 1v1s, you can choose to have the freeze as the second tripod. I prefer to have the double grenade, but you can have the freeze as well. The reason why I don't recommend using the freeze, and I will show you, it is basically the freeze only applies when the skill is actually thrown. That's when the freeze is done, which can be helpful, but the issue with freezes are that you can't combo out of them. So you freeze an enemy, you can't knock them down, and you can't microstun them. You can microstun them right after the freeze wears out, but they still have time to dash out of it in between the microstun hits and the freeze. You can time the freeze and the knockdown, but it is very hard to do it. But if you learn to do it, it's a very great tool to actually catch up people. But the timing of it is really awkward, and it's something that I wouldn't rely on at all. That's why I still take the double knockdown, because people expect the first hit, so they stay out of there, and sometimes you can catch someone that has less knowledge of the class. You can catch them out with the second part of the Despire's hit. Moving on, we have Quick Shot, and once again, probably the most important skill that we can have in a 1-on-1. Without this skill, it's basically impossible to combo. We need to have this skill in 1-on-1s. And it is basically because of the easiest combo we have. It is any microstun, so Despair or Bullet Dance, any sort of microstun into Quick Shot for its CC. You can go into Last Supper. You can also go from a microstun into Quick Shot. You can also go into Spiral Flame if you want to. It is a bit tricky timing. You need to be fast for that to actually work, but it is a possibility. So you take the second tripod here for the extra duration for the CC. Without this, you won't have time to use any damaging skills after this. And here we have Judgment Time. This is a bit of a awkward skill to use. You never use this skill unless your opponent is CC'd. And it's very situational if you want to use it as well. The reason I have this at level 4 is for the extra damage of the tripod. Since I never use the skill when the opponent is not CC'd, you don't get any extra, you don't get any value of having an extra long CC on the skill. The CD you can remove with 5 seconds as well, which is good, but I usually use this after the Last Supper, and now they are pretty much at the same cooldown, so I choose to just have the extra damage. And when I use this skill, it's basically after we've done the combo of having a microstun into Quick Shot into Last Supper, you can use Judgment Time for some free easy damage while they're down. I would not recommend doing this versus classes such as Infighters or Soul Monsters, the ones that can have a lot of pressure on you, because the timing of it forces you to almost immediately use space after this, which is not preferred versus classes that can easily stun you or use another form of CC than a knockdown. But otherwise I recommend using this skill after Last Supper, just because of the extra damage dealt towards your enemy. And speaking of Last Supper, I use the exact same tripods as in the 3v3 one, and it's the reduced cooldown. We have the small dash on the skill, and also extra damage when an enemy is immune to CCs, and the triple hit. In the next skill we have Catastrophe. I maxed out this skill for its third tripod, which I will mention in a bit. But first of all, I take the super armor. You can take the extra distance, but you would rarely use that at all. Um, you can also take the time for it to aim, but it's also the same there. It's rarely used at all, so I usually just take the super armor in case I want to use this skill outside of a combo. In the second tripod, I take the extra damage to a CC'd target. And the third tripod, I take the extra hit. So this makes it so the skill shoots 2 grenades instead of 1. And I will show you. So instead of just using 1, it hits a double. So right now, it looks like this. This is with the third tripod. It hits twice. And if you don't have it, it is smaller area and it's only 1 hit. The reason I take this tripod is because if you hit an enemy in the center of it, you get double damage numbers. This can be a little bit tricky in the beginning to actually hit, but if you just do some practice and learn the range of it, you can easily learn how to do it. An easy tip as well to actually hit this skill every single time is to use execution. If you know that your opponent has used their recover, you can catch them with execution and go straight into catastrophe to always get the double hit. That's the easiest way to actually hit the skill every single time. Moving on to that, we have aim shot. Instead of getting 7 points into this, as I do in the 3v3 build, I only do 4 points here, because I feel like the stun is not valuable enough in a 1v1. Yes, you can get some free damage, but I rarely use this skill anyway in 1v1s. The reason is that a lot of classes are very mobile, such as all the fighter classes or berserkers or arcanas or even other gunners. You get punished really hard in this skill, so I rarely use it and I don't want to spend points onto it. I do spend up to level 4 just because of the reduced aim time, just so you can actually get the combo shots with this skill. And last we have perfect shot. I recently changed 7 levels into perfect shot instead of spiral flame, and the only reason is perfect shot is easier to hit, and for the amount of points you put into it, it deals more damage than spiral flame. It also has better third tripod or second tripods than spiral flame do. So I take the extra penetration on perfect shot in the first tripod, and in the second tripod I take the extra damage in the perfect zone. Before, for the ones that wanna take spiral flame, I use the reduced aim time and the crit chance on people that are below 50% health. I also want to show a bit of what I do in a 1v1, not only the build. And as I showed before, we have the standard combo of doing any sort of micro stun into quick shot, last supper, judgment time. This is the main combo I use when I know that the opponent doesn't have, or when the opponent do have their recover. Usually they will recover after this, and you would either want to try to get them with a micro stun again by using your spiral tracker, that they jump into it, or you can chase them down with execution. And when you get the CC on someone that you know doesn't have their recover, this is the combo I usually do. So let's say I have already knocked this opponent down. I catch him with the micro stun. I go into execution, catastrophe, spiral flame, into last supper. Um, if you don't have last supper because you did the quick shot last supper combo beforehand, you can use perfect shot inside of the combo instead. But that's the main combo I use in 1v1s. Moving on to the PvE skills. The PvE skills varies quite a bit from the PvP ones, since we don't have to focus as much on movement and staying protected as we do in PvP. Um, the first skill we have in the PvE build is 4 levels into Spiral Tracker for the 15% extra critical hit buff for 6 seconds. This combined with the Equilibrium buff basically makes it so you can have the 15% critical hit chance at 100% uptime all the time, which is something you really should keep track of while doing raids or other PvE content. Second, we have 7 levels into Meteor Stream, and the first tripod is basically just 20% extra damage, which you can never go wrong with. Um, you don't really need the CC here, because you basically only use this skill on stationary targets anyway. And it only applies so it's extra CC time, which is unnecessary since mobs can't use recover anyway. And mana, our class doesn't have any mana issues at all, so there's no reason to actually take this one. In the second one we have 60% extra critical hit chance, and this combined with the 15% critical hit chance buff makes it so you have a high chance of actually critting with this skill. And also, as I will show you later on in the video, I usually like to go crit in my PvE build as well, giving this one even more chance to hit. Basically almost making it a guaranteed hit every time you use the skill. Then we have the first maxed out skill, which is Equilibrium. And as I said before, we have the 15% critical hit chance buff for 12 seconds. This is pretty much mandatory on this skill, in my opinion. And that is basically just because the buff lasts for so long. This makes it so you can have 100% uptime for it, which boosts both yours and your team's damage a lot during a raid or a dungeon. After this, we have 30% critical hit chance, basically just to make the skill deal more damage. And the third tripod I use to have Equilibrium be at 360 degrees. It shoots all around you, and also increases critical damage by 100%. So having the buff already on them and 30% critical hit chance with the second tripod basically makes the damage of the skill very high. Can you also get as many hits as possible in the back of a boss, it can deal a lot of damage. Moving on towards the shotgun skills. As you can see, I have all 4 shotgun skills maxed out. This is basically just because they are the biggest damage we can deal in a PvE scenario. They are very long cooldowns, but they hit very hard. And with the first one, we have Precursor of the End. The first tripod is just 20% extra damage. The second tripod is 25% extra damage on top of that. And the last one is 80% extra damage on top of both of them. And basically a theme with all of these shotgun skills is that their tripods just increases their damage. That's why the shotgun skills are very strong in PvE, because their damage is scaling really, really high, but you need to learn the timing of when to use them. After this, we have Shotgun Speaker. Basically the same here as well. We have 20% extra damage, 25% extra damage, and 80% extra damage. Something to keep in mind with shotgun skills in general is that the closer you are to your enemy, the more damage they will deal. So you want to stay as close to your opponent as possible when you use shotgun skills. Then we have Master of Shotgun. We have the 20% extra damage, as on the other shotgun skills as well. We have 40% extra damage here as well. And here comes the interesting part. I choose the second tripod here because it adds a perfect zone to the skill. You do, however, lose out a bit of range of the skill, but since you want to stay as close as possible to bosses and stuff anyway, it doesn't really matter. But when you hit this perfect zone, it deals a lot more damage than what the skill would do without it, at least in my opinion. The other tripod is without a doubt viable as well. I just prefer to use the Perfect Zone one. And then we have Last Supper. Here I use the same as in PvP builds. I have the skill cooldown reduction, just for as much uptime as possible. I have the dash and extra damage to strangling targets. I use this one because Last Supper is the easiest shotgun skill to hit on bosses. So when a boss is moving around a lot, the dash helps you so you can actually hit the Last Supper a lot more frequently on enemies. I also take the triple hit because it deals generally more damage than the double shotgun do. And then the last one is just 4 levels into Spiral Flame uh, because of the reduced aim time. You can choose to use these 4 skill points into any other sniper skill that you prefer using, or into any other uh, double gun skill as well. I prefer to have it here just to make it a bit quicker to use uh, while dealing damage. Something to notice here as well, compared to the PvP, is the skills I actually have on my quick bar. Instead of having quick shot, I use Meteor Stream. Instead of Despair, I use Cruel Tracker. Cruel Tracker is basically just, it can crit a lot and it has back attack damage. It just deals more damage in a short amount of time compared to Despair. And if I want a large amount of microstuns, I just use Bullet Dance instead. I think if you don't max out Despair, which we don't want to do in PvE, it's not really worth using. And those are the skill builds I use for 3v3, 1v1s and PvE. I'd also like to show you the stat prioritization that I have on Devil Hunter. I've ignored the bad item level, first of all. And this is my PvE build. This is focused mainly on agility with a critical secondary. This is basically just to get extra consistent damage to crits or extra critical hit chance. This combined with Spiral Tracker and Equilibrium's buff makes it you should have a constant 25% critical hit chance on everything you do, basically. At least in raids or at boss fights in dungeons. And that is without taking account for the extra critical hit chance you have in some tripods in some of our skills. In the PvP build one, I use agility. I max out agility as much as possible, regardless of what the secondary stat will be. I just prefer this to have as much uptime as possible on our damaging skills and also our movement skills. Since our cooldowns are so long, we have damaging skills that are up at like 36-second cooldowns. Having a lot of agility, it scales really well with our class. We get a lot of extra seconds for a lot of agility, so that's what I prefer using. I also used to use a mixture between agility and subdue in PvP, which worked out very well. I do not recommend though to go underneath 500 agility either in PvP or PvE. I think at that point we start to having a bit too much downtime on our skills. So keeping it over 500 is what I recommend. And with that said, I'm gonna conclude the video here. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to show me what you think about these builds in the comment section below. Also, feel free to link me any of your builds that you have. I will also leave links to these builds down in the description, so you don't have to pause the video over and over again, so feel free to check that out as well. And I'll hopefully see you in the next video.